All right, for the most part, I have completed the construction of my pumpkin. If you watched the time lapse in the last video there, okay, added some horns, right? Now what I need to do is, it's a lot of the fine tuning and the cleanup and making sure all those little bumps and scratch marks and little boogers of clay that are stuck there are gone. If we leave those in there, they immediately say somebody made this, or that it was a man-made object. We want this to look as realistic as possible. I know, I'm gonna say it again. Make the viewers see exactly what it is that you want them to see. You don't want them to see the little tool marks. You don't want them to see the little boogers. You don't want them to see all the little chunks of clay that you left behind on the teeth. The teeth should be perfectly tapered and perfectly smooth. Same thing with the stem up here. I'm gonna need to do a little bit more texture work as I'm looking at it while I'm talking to you guys. Make sure that the transitions from the eyes and the mouth and the lip and all that kind of stuff are nice and smooth and clean, and there's no tool marks that are indicating that this was ever made by man. We want this to look as realistic as possible, okay? So I am gonna let this dry for probably another day. I'm not adding anything to it, so there's no reason for me to cover it up in a plastic bag. If I need to let it sit for a day, fine. But again, this goes back to controlling that drying process so that the clay is at the right firmness, dryness, wetness, whatever it happens to be, for you to be able to do the things that you need to do. It needs to be at least leather hard, if not softer, in order to attach things. But once it's done, you can go ahead and let that dry. You can do a lot of work once it's bone dry, but I usually like to work with it just before it gets bone dry. The clay kind of flakes off, it's drier, and not to mention it's a little more forgiving. You can also use your fingers and your thumbs to smooth things out, and little dimple marks and that kind of stuff you can clean up if the clay is still a little bit on the wet side. But right now the clay is a little bit still too soft. I'm gonna let that dry, and I'll show you guys the final tune-up in the very end, in the last video. And that's the jack-o'-lantern pumpkin almost done.